Hello and welcome back to another video. So while garrison invasions are pretty cool, I think that the idea could be taken further. Currently we just do our weekly garrison invasions, but we never really get to see the forces of our garrisons deal with much else. And follower missions are just clicking on a menu, so I don't actually count them when it comes to this. One of the things that the invasions show us is that the scenario system can actually be quite well used in a manner that doesn't really lead to the various problems that scenarios faced all the way back in Mists of Pandaria. Now, what I would add is basically another type of scenario to this garrison ecosystem, and basically they are assaults in which players, up to 2 of your friends, a bunch of garrison troops, and then also your bodyguard followers, attack the various opponents that we have. So be that the Botani people, the Shadow Moon clan, the Iron Horde, basically any of the factions that we do a garrison invasion with. So essentially see this as being a bit of content that kind of happens in tandem with a garrison invasion. Yes, your enemies can attack you, but you can also attack them. And like the garrison invasions, you can bring along your friends and bodyguard followers. And really, it's just a similar sort of thing. It's just more content, and I think something that could actually be a little bit more interesting. Now, the level of interestingness sort of depends on the varying degrees of ambition in which this could be done. So the simplest form of this would be you attacking your opponents in the form of there being one scenario per enemy faction. Just like with the invasions, you'd be able to do one of these per week. Now, implementing this should be easy enough in terms of workflow, as the art has already been done, and I actually think that these scenarios should just take place in Draenor as we know it, so they really wouldn't have to make much else in terms of new art assets or even new bits of the world. They could literally just copy-paste it into a scenario. Now, all they would have to do is just whip up some interesting mobs and a few mini-bosses. Difficulty would be similar to heroic scenarios from Mists of Pandaria. However, of course, you know, having just one scenario per faction doesn't really lend itself well to repetition, so it isn't a perfect solution. One of the things that did suck about the scenarios back in MoP is they were kind of cute the first time you did them, but with multiple attempts, the content was just not very interesting. Any times that they did RP, well, they were just annoying because it was just needless waiting, and they were often not really difficult enough to make the actual gameplay that interesting. So essentially with something like this, you would just hop off, do a quick scenario that was decently challenging and didn't bog you down in, you know, crazy amounts of NPCs talking and making you wait. It would be pretty fast, pretty fun, and hopefully quite challenging, and would give a decent reward. Now, in terms of the score, I would not have this be based on a point system, because I feel like it's just immersion breaking and overly gamey. I mean, when you think about defending a keep, you don't really think about scoring points as you slay the people who are trying to kill you. No, you think about, oh good, well, I managed to defend this, that's great. Oh look, I didn't let anything get damaged, that's even better, give me a reward for that. Rather than just boiling everything down to just an arbitrary number. A little bit like how the war assets or whatever it was in Mass Effect 3 kind of just felt really gamey and immersion breaking. Anyway, so what I would do instead is have bonus objectives that actually involve difficulty. I think this is a far more sensible manner of doing scoring that lets people essentially just earn extra rewards based on doing optional difficulty. I think that's really good, and it just sort of feels holistic. You feel like, well, if I put in the extra effort and kill this optional boss who is over there, then I've done something extra, therefore I should get something more, rather than just, oh wow, look at that, I just cleaved through this whole army super quick, gave me a gold medal. I don't think that's very in keeping with immersion or just the fantasy of defending anything at all. So that's what I do in terms of scoring. It would just be bonus objectives, just like with the heroic scenarios that were there in Mists of Pandaria. Now, earlier I said that this was just the simple version of what these would be, i.e., you know, just a single set scenario per enemy faction. The more complex version, I think, would be a bit better, and it does involve randomization, and randomization can be fantastic when it comes to content like this. You could just have a number of different settings, so perhaps attacking a supply caravan, raiding a troop camp, burning down an outpost, and a few others, and the game would choose one of these at random. then the specifics of the attack in terms of enemy mobs would be randomized too, including having bosses with semi-randomized abilities in a similar manner to the boss affixes that you could get in Diablo 3 Elite mobs. One of the great things about randomization is that a relatively small amount of work can turn into a massive amount of content, though of course that content won't always be of as good quality as stuff that is handcrafted. Still, I think that having a scenario be generated out of a pool of possible locations, enemies, mini-bosses, and side objectives would make things feel quite different every time, especially if the content is hard enough to properly engage players. Now, there's quite a lot here, and make no mistake, this would be a major patch feature, so I don't really make this lightly. I just think it would be a cool idea, and maybe even if it didn't make it into Warlords of Draenor, perhaps if they were thinking of doing a similar system in a future expansion, then maybe this would be a decent idea. So in principle, this is basically the opposite of a garrison invasion. Instead of the opponent invading our garrison, it's us going and, you know, killing their commanders, raiding their camps, destroying a supply caravan, things like that. Then in addition to doing those base objectives, you could also have a side objective to kill some particularly hard mini-boss that's optional, or maybe just you'd have an objective to do the whole raid very quickly and get in and out nice and fast. Basically just stuff that makes a lot of sense within the fiction of you having a base that is attacking and defending the Iron Horde. As much as those daily garrison missions that we currently get sort of do fulfill the idea of attacking the enemy factions, I mean, I don't think they really feel like that. They just feel like you going there and filling up a progress bar, whereas something like this I think would fulfill that fantasy better and would add a little bit more content. I'm sure that perhaps, maybe like me, a lot of you are just sort of sitting in your garrison, hopping from character to character, completing the odd mission, keeping on top of your work orders, and then just thinking, huh, well, I've already done my invasion, what else is there to do? Well, this would be another thing that I think would be fun over multiple weeks because of that random element. Now, they could also tie this into invasion generation by having an assault considerably count towards getting an invasion. And also, if they went with that randomized route, then they could even try to do something akin to the Diablo 3 bounties. Though while I think that's a cute idea, the differences in the reward systems of Warlords of Draenor, or just WoW in general, and Diablo 3 would maybe warrant sort of large changes to how that bounty system is handled. And even with that, I'm not too sure how it would just fit into the landscape of Warlords of Draenor, though certainly we do end up getting loads of randomized weapon tokens and things like that, so perhaps they might be able to make a, basically a bounty system work in this. Hard to know. But perhaps it would be a decent idea for a future expansion. Now, as far as rewards go, I would have them be pretty decent. Do remember that Blizzard are putting in heroic invasions in patch 6.1, and difficulty-wise these would be roughly on par with them. So I would have these reward extra Pexus crystals and garrison resources no matter what. Again, remember that they plan on adding more ways to spend garrison resources in patch 6.1, so hopefully that stuff would still be useful. On top of that, I think that basically just access to the same rewards as heroic invasions would work out quite well, and then completing the bonus objectives would award you with an extra loot bag per objective. I think it's hard to say what rewards would specifically work because we don't know what Blizzard are planning exactly for 6.1, but something along those lines. Anyway, that's been it for this little idea. I just think it would flesh out this system a little bit more and give you a more rounded and varied experience at the end of the day, which hopefully would be a good thing. Anyway, that's it for the video, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.